Fight Mike here. Today I'm going to be breaking down Joshua Van's future opponents after his win a couple of weeks ago against Alexandre Pantoja, where Pantoja broke his elbow or dislocated his elbow 15 seconds or 30 seconds into the fight. And I've ranked all of Joshua Van's future opponents that he might come up against in the next 2 years on difficulty. But let's start off with the easiest opponent for Joshua Van, and I think it's Amir Albazi. I think Joshua Van breaks Amir Albazi. Think about how Albazi needs to win. It's got to be by like smudge robbery decision. The only reason he's even in the top 5 is because he had one of the most egregious robberies over Kai Kara-France, who got smoked and demolished by Pantoja. Smoked, had no moments in that fight where he even looked like he was comparable. And this guy was able to stick his tongue out and beat Amir Albazi in a decision where they robbed him. And the thing is, to beat Joshua Van, you've got to be exceptional at some things. And Albazi is kind of bad at everything, but good at everything, where he's not got really any KO power, not really got the best wrestling out there. He's sort of like a budget version of Bilal Muhammad. And he's often shooting from super far out. He's not really good on the feet. He doesn't really have any power. And the way that he shoots with like the blast double legs and really goes in for them, it's going to be easy for Van to really like read and just sprawl and rest his nuts, honestly, on Amir Albazi's neck. And the way that he shoots will leave him room to get encountered. He shoots from so far out. Joshua Van's going to be able to separate, instantly land back. And if you watch the Moreno fight with Amir Albazi, Moreno's kind of pitter-patter, not really landing too many strikes either. And he was like 2-1ing Amir Albazi on volume. I think Albazi threw something like 60 or landed 60-something strikes over 5 rounds. With that, Van's probably landing 300 to Amir Albazi. And although Albazi's durable, I think that he's going to get overwhelmed up against the cage at the late round 2. And I think he's going to get broken and finished by Joshua Van. Moving on to the next most difficult opponent, it's Joshua Van versus Steve Erceg. This is a weird one. I don't necessarily think Erceg's better than Albazi. I would pick Erceg to beat Albazi. I don't really think he has that much more of a chance, though, to beat Joshua Van. Because Erceg's striking style, it's awful for a Joshua Van fight. He throws the 1-2, and then he ducks away of it like he's expecting you to just chin him out cold every time. And he doesn't make an adjustment there. You literally can almost bet your living paycheck that if Steve Erceg throws a 1-2, he's getting hit with the 2 back. And that is Joshua Van's bread and butter. Slip the 1-2, land the right hand over the top. He constantly does that. And everything that Steve Erceg does wrong, Van will do well against him. So, like, in the grappling, he's going to shoot some shots from far away. Joshua Van's going to sprawl him. Anything that Steve Erceg does in the striking, Joshua Van's going to counter his straight shots, land good hooks over the top. When Steve Erceg's going for that fadeaway left hook that he ended up dropping Matt Schnell with, what is Joshua Van going to do? He's going to slip under, land the 1-2, straight over the top. Everything that Steve Erceg does well, Joshua Van does better. And Steve's only method of victory is going to come in the grappling, and he's not really strong enough to be able to get those takedowns on Joshua Van. And he's very tall for the bantamweight division, so it's going to be really hard to get to Joshua Van's hips. I do think Erceg, though, has very good survivability. Like, you'll see him almost get finished all the time, and he'll be able to push through and survive it. I think he'll be able to survive till round 3 before he gets finished by TKO. But that right hand over the top for Joshua Van's always going to land, and that's eventually going to be what finishes Steve Erceg. Moving on, though, to Joshua Van's next most difficult opponent, it's Asu Almabayev. I would say this is a little bit closer than Steve Erceg, because although Asu Almabayev offensively is a worse striker and comfortably he does no damage, he can literally land like an overhand right on you that will do negative amounts of damage. But the difference is that Asu's really good at latching onto people. Once he gets you into that clinch, it's hard to get away from him. And we saw with the Alex Perez matchup last time out, he was able to latch up that guillotine in seconds and able to finish him in that 3rd round. But the takedown's going to come a little bit easier against Van than other opponents would. Like, than Steve Erceg would Like, Steve Erceg's never getting Joshua Van down, whereas Asu at least has a shot at it. And I think the sprawl is going to be there for Joshua Van. He's going to be able to separate from Asu's takedown attempts. And I just don't think that Asu's got the clinch game and like the work around the back game that a Pantoja or Taira would to be able to get down Joshua Van. And Joshua Van's, he's got the sprawl for an Asu Almabayev fight. Since Almabayev has nothing to offer on the feet and he literally throws punches like my sister. Actually, fuck it. My sister throws punches better than Asu does. Asu literally throws straight arm punches. You know those ones where someone's like genuinely windmilling, closing their eyes, looking at the floor? That's how every single Asu Almabayev shot is thrown. And it's just like, he throws it like he's expecting to just get chinned out cold every time he throws it. And even though Van's got the explosive sprawl, he probably won't even need it because Asu's got nothing to offer on the feet. And I think that Joshua Van's going to be able to stay out of danger and get a TKO in round 3, a little bit later on in the round. Moving on, though, to Joshua Van's next most difficult fight, would be Brandon Royval. We've already seen this fight, and I think 9 times out of 10 it goes the same as the last time. Royval's tricky in range against Joshua Van, but he doesn't really have any pop in his shots, and it makes it super difficult for him. And apart from the jab, he doesn't really use his range that well. He's not a big kicker at all. I think to pose some issues for Joshua Van, he would need like a mean snap kick or a good body kick or even some good head kicks. And that's not Brandon Royval's game. He's really into the boxing, the straight punches. And the thing is that since he's so good at those straight punches, he's also so easy to counter on those straight punches. Joshua Van was able to land that right hand at will, similarly to where Steve Erceg will get caught over the top. It's the same exact thing for Brandon Royval. And Van has a mean counter. He's going to continually punish Royval, even though he's not going to shut him off like Manel Kape was able to do last weekend. He's still going to be able to put so much damage on him. And even if Royval changes up the game plan, goes for some grappling, it's going to be to no success. He's way too weak. It's, again, a similar matchup to Steve Erceg. I would actually love to see a Royval versus Erceg matchup. It's sort of like the battle between the non-damage guys, or the battle between the twigs that have, like, not to call Erceg a twig, I love to watch him, but the battle between the two soy twigs who are going to be landing pitter-patter shots for 5 rounds up against each other. It's sort of like the Moreno versus Erceg matchup. But I think that it was going towards a 4th round TKO in that matchup between Van and Royval, and I think it goes down by round 4 TKO every single time. Moving on to the next most difficult for Joshua Van, we've got Brandon Moreno, the other Brandon. And although I think Brandon Moreno is a worse fighter than Brandon Royval, I think against strikers he's slightly better. I think it's a stupid way to put it, but Brandon Royval's better against grapplers. He's got a better anti-grappler style, like a Steve Erceg would. But then Moreno, I think, will do better against the strikers. I think he takes his head off center line a lot more. He puts a bit more into his shots, has more versatility in his striking alone. He'll go for some nice body kicks every now and then. He's got a good 1-2, and he'll throw combinations with uppercuts as well. And in the grappling, although he's a worse scrambler than Brandon Royval, he's better at holding down and he latches up submissions quicker. So he's at least got that fluke ability over Joshua Van. But Moreno doesn't throw punches anymore. Moreno decided, hey man, I want to just stay in the UFC, man. And now he just throws low output with no sting on it. Like, Brandon, stop and just try to win. Stop. We see this for like 24 minutes of a 25-minute Brandon Moreno fight, where nowadays he's just standing there, putting faces up, doing absolutely nothing. And you know in a Joshua Van matchup, you absolutely know he's going to be fainting at range, doing that stupid face he does, ready to get hit on the lips by Joshua Van. And Van's going to be landing body shots, landing over the top, landing straight shots, straight punch. Every single time he's going to be landing everything on Brandon Moreno. And I mentioned earlier the Amir Albazi versus Brandon Moreno fight, how it was 2-1 Moreno. I think it was like 139 significant strikes to Albazi's 60. It'd be literally like 500 strikes from Van and 130 from Moreno. Moreno does not want to win anymore. He wants to feint at range, do that silly face he does, and bob his head around like he's not going to get hit in the face anyway by the punches. And I'm not here just to shit on Moreno, but we're losing the hunger from him as well. He used to grit down, really throw a lot into his punches. He would hurt Figueiredo, or he would get hurt by Figueiredo, land back, go for a guillotine. Every single moment of old Brandon Moreno fights, he's looking to search and destroy. Now he's a lot less, and Joshua Van, he's all grit and effort. I think that Joshua Van doesn't finish Moreno by TKO. I think he's still going to be so tough to finish on the feet. I just think that he's going to dominantly decision win like a 50-45 or maybe even a 50-44 where he like tees off against Moreno up against the cage with body shots whilst he's like getting dropped every couple of minutes like a Nicholas Motta versus Nazim Sadikov type combination. And I think that he's going to get a dominant decision. Moving on to the next most difficult opponent for Joshua Van. This is a weird one. Charles Johnson. Charles Johnson. You may wonder why Johnson's above so many. I think he's better. Not only do I think he's stylistically so difficult for Joshua Van at any point in Joshua Van's career, I think he's better than Brandon and Royval at this point in Royval's career. I think he beats Royval. I think if you put a grappler in front of him, he probably loses. You put Amir Albazi in front of him, he probably loses. You put Tatsuro Taira in front of him, he probably loses. You could say he might lose to Asu Almabayev, but I trust him a little bit more in that matchup. But anyone who's going to strike with Charles Johnson, give me a Charles Johnson, Brandon Moreno, Charles Johnson, Brandon Royval, Charles Johnson, Kai Kara France. I wish I included Kai Kara France on this list, but Charles Johnson, Steve Erceg, he smokes all of these three. I know he's lost to Royval in the past. I think Charles Johnson's really, really good. Really good. And the thing is about Johnson, why I've got him above Royval and Moreno, he's infinitely more dangerous than those two. Those two are too pitter-patter on the feet. Although Moreno can drop people sometimes, Charles Johnson will flatline you out cold with some rangy power. Charles Johnson's really good, man. Really good. One of my dreams, actually, is to interview Charles Johnson. I love Charles Johnson. I love the way that he fights. And no doubt do I think that Charles Johnson is going to be more gritty and hungry than a Royval or Moreno. I would argue, I'm going to say Charles Johnson's probably the most gritty fighter in the UFC flyweight division at the moment. I would argue he's the most hungry fighter in this point of the UFC flyweight division. You're not getting a Charles Johnson fight where he starts quitting on himself. No chance. Charles Johnson's way too much of a Chad for that. He's too much of a Chad, and he's super durable. He's so durable. You see in the Lona Kavanaugh fight, he's getting hit in the eyeball. Can't see. Can't see at all. Battles through it as an absolute warrior he is. You can hurt Charles Johnson. He's going to recover. You can hurt him. You can drop him. He's going to finish you eventually. And he's one of the only ones I could see keeping up with Van's output. And I think in a rematch, Van's going to find himself getting hurt in one point, but I see him outpointing Charles Johnson to a decision. I could argue where Charles Johnson's able to get another finish over him. And honestly, I'd love to see it. My dream one day would be to see Charles Johnson as a flyweight champion. I just don't think I see it. Now, moving on to Joshua Van's next most difficult opponent. It's Alexandre Pantoja. Now, look, before UFC 323, I'm saying Pantoja's the hardest. And it's not even like there was anything proven between then and now. I just hate picking guys off a layoff like this. It's going to be super tough on Pantoja's return. At his age, 35, 36 years old in flyweight, it's going to be really hard to return back and come back as the Terminator that Pantoja is. And I hate to say it, but an elbow injury like that, that's going to set him back a few months. An elbow injury like that, he's not going to be extending as quick on his combinations. An elbow injury like that, he's not going to be as confident pushing in his grappling, making sure that he's really thinking about that so he doesn't really dislocate that elbow. And we've never seen someone come back 100% after a brutal injury like that. And for Pantoja, it's unlucky for him. I picked him by a first round submission against Joshua Van. And he's got a very good chance of getting it done in a rematch. A very good chance. I would argue he should be the favorite. But as I said, we don't see people come back 100% after an injury like that. And for Pantoja, although this fight's a stylistically good fight for him, he's also known to be quite a hittable fighter, and he's slowing down now. Pardon me, I'm going to die. Pantoja's a lot more hittable. And if you think about a slower Pantoja coming off an elbow surgery, he's going to find it tough against Van, and Van's going to be sharper. He's going to have time to work on his grappling. And I'd actually pick Van by a razor close damage-based decision. It actually pains me to say it. I'm crying right now talking about it. It's been a really emotional time, but Joshua Van is actually that good. And I think that with this extra time and with the decline of Alexandre Pantoja, which I'm sure we're going to have to see, sadly, I think he beats Pantoja in like the most such a razor close decision. Now moving on to Joshua Van's most next difficult opponent, Manel Kape. And this is where I see it getting like really 50-50 for him. This is where the going gets tough for Joshua Van here. I can see, like, after seeing how Manel Kape manhandled Royval, shows how much of a problem he's going to be in this fight. Where Van was able to stay up with Royval in activity-wise, do a little bit more and do a little bit more damage. Manel just demolition jobbed him. He made it an easy fight against Brandon Royval. And against Joshua Van, he's going to have the clear power advantage. And honestly, I think the speed advantage as well. Manel Kape is lightning fast. Explosive as anyone. I would say more explosive, faster than Joshua Van. And the main difference between them is Van is super durable and very hittable. Kape is similarly durable, but not as hittable. So it's sort of going to be a war of, can Manel Kape deal with the massive strike differential that Joshua Van puts over all of his opponents? But then can Manel Kape avoid that mass amount of damage and land that one shot of his own? Because we've seen Joshua Van get hurt by guys like Charles Johnson. And we've seen him getting hurt, I think it was by Kevin Borjas. And that sort of short, explosive power is everything that Kape has. And this is going to be an all-out war if this is the next fight to make. All-out war. I think that this honestly should be the next fight to make. Between the more bullish and active fighter on the feet, someone who's stubborn as all hell and young like Joshua Van, against like an inactive, really methodical, breaking you down power monster in Manel Kape. It's a bloody tough war. It absolutely is. And I'm going to say I think Joshua Van wins. I think he wins in a decision, but like an actual like split decision where one of them give a 10-8 to Manel Kape. Like I could see Manel Kape dropping him like multiple times and losing 2 rounds before it. I could see it being like a Michael Bisping versus Anderson Silva, except a little bit less flashy. But where Joshua Van's probably going to put like a lot of shots on Manel Kape, but Manel Kape doesn't cut easily or mark easily. And I think Manel Kape's sort of going to play that game where he'll land massive shots, but then also get outstruck and outdone in moments. And I think that the strike differential is really where Joshua Van's going to be able to get the win here. And I think he's going to win a 48-47 decision over Manel Kape here. I really do. It's going to be such a tough fight for both guys. And I think it would be like a fight of all time in the flyweight division. I honestly think this could be the best fight of the flyweight division's history. I genuinely do believe that. So I hope they make that fight next. Now moving on to the next most difficult opponent for Joshua Van, it's Tatsuro Taira. He's going to be so tough for Van. And I know if Van can defend the takedowns, he's got it in the bag, but that's easier said than done. Taira is an expert of turning every position into a grappling position. And the one difference between Taira and Pantoja, and the biggest reason why I picked Taira over Pantoja, Pantoja's a better striker, and that's not necessarily why I'm picking him. Pantoja's a better fighter all around. But Pantoja's a better striker, and he'll stay there for longer. He's going to test his striking out. He's going to eat some shots to deliver you some back. He's going to eat 3 shots so he can do a double leg kick on you for no reason. No rhyme or reason. And although he's got the durability to do that, he might not necessarily still have the speed to do the same. Whereas Taira, he'll play that range game. He'll use his footwork, try and land one shot at a time, and then use, I would say, a much more explosive grappling game than Pantoja. Pantoja, I think, has got just as good grappling game, but I don't think it's as fast, and I think that he has to methodically work his way around the back, where Joshua Van can use steps to get out of that position. So Taira, it's more a little bit different. He just sort of explodes, and then he's in mount all of a sudden. So, like what he did to Brandon Moreno, he just sort of bulldozed him over and landed up in mount. That sort of thing, if he lands there with Joshua Van, it's wraps. He's getting finished. And I think he submits Joshua Van in the later rounds after having some trouble early. Maybe Joshua Van's able to survive getting his back taken for 2 rounds. But we saw in the Taira versus Royval fight that Taira is just so good at scrambling. Even if he lost that Royval fight, I think Royval is a better scrambler. And I think that Joshua Van, he's going to get submitted in those later rounds. We saw that Taira was able to take the back of Royval almost for the entire of the 4th round there. So I think it's the fight that you got to... I think it's a very hard fight. Not necessarily the one that you got to make next, though. Now, moving on to what I think the most difficult matchup is for Joshua Van. Everyone's going to disagree with this. Kyoji Horiguchi. Kyoji Horiguchi. I know this seems disagreeable, but I think that Kyoji is a nightmare matchup for Joshua Van. He's got a very unique set of skills. Like, tell me someone else in the flyweight division who's got incredible elusive outside movement, great at drawing you in, can one-shot you from a range using that movement, but then is an expert at fighting in the clinch and fighting in a grappling position. He's an expert at moving around to the back. He's an expert at using his kicks to draw you into his punches. And he's powerful. Everything that you want in a martial artist, Kyoji Horiguchi has. I'm going to argue he's the best flyweight on the planet. I think he beats Pantoja. I think he beats Joshua Van. I think Taira is a very difficult fight for Kyoji Horiguchi, but I think he's able to draw out that and win it. He's got such a difficult, unique set of skills, and he's an expert of staying in his realm of the fight. Expert. You will not catch Kyoji Horiguchi fighting someone else's fight. You're not going to catch Kyoji Horiguchi inside boxing with Joshua Van. Never. Ever. Way too smart for that sort of shit. No chance he's going to do that. And Joshua Van doesn't have the skills to avoid the massive difference in skills that Kyoji Horiguchi has. Van is a little bit more of a slower and a methodical mover. He's a little bit... I don't like using plotting, but it's sort of like more measured movements. Sort of like a Petr Yan. And we saw a matchup I would say this is similar of, is if it's like a Petr Yan versus O'Malley. Except imagine O'Malley had an amazing grappling game as well. That's a tough fight for Petr Yan. And Van, although he's the slower, more methodical mover, he does have fantastic cardio and combinations. And that is going to pose some threats for Kyoji Horiguchi. I just think that he doesn't have that sting to be able to put Kyoji down. And against someone like Kyoji Horiguchi who's jumping out at range, Joshua Van's combinations, he might land the last 2 or 3, but I don't think he's landing the first 3 punches of the combination. And since he doesn't have that one-shot KO, brutal KO power, it's going to be so hard for him to finish a guy like Kyoji Horiguchi, a guy who's hard to catch clean on the chin. And that means if he's not going to finish Kyoji Horiguchi, he has to outwork Kyoji. And although he's got that massive strike differential where he can keep unloading shots like the machine gun Joshua Van is, since he doesn't have that one-shot KO power, outworking Kyoji is going to be a nightmare. Kyoji's also got elite cardio. He can take the fight anywhere, unlike Joshua Van. And he's able to use that outside footwork and outside movement, all the kicks on the outside, the spinning wheel kicks, the head kicks after the right hand. He's able to use all these tools to keep Joshua Van on his toes and make him sort of stint his offense, making sure that he's keeping low output, or at least lower than usual, lower to the point where he's not going to break Kyoji Horiguchi. And bringing up fights of Kyoji, that Tagear fight was a demolition job. And those skills are really hard to keep under wraps for Kyoji Horiguchi. And it's so hard to control him because he's constantly moving on the outside, constantly feinting at you, throwing up perfect jabs. And he uses range really, really well. He uses that outside footwork where he's almost leaping into range. And it works for him so well. It's going to be so hard for Joshua Van to catch him coming in there. And historically, Kyoji Horiguchi has fantastic defense. Not only that, he's got the timing on the takedowns and the submission threat to really worry Joshua Van in every moment of the fight. He's got a massive range of kicks. His footwork's going to work really well with those as well. And against the smaller guys, those head kicks are going to work so much better. And unlike a Steve Erceg or unlike a taller opponent like Brandon Royval, he's going to be able to get to the hips of Joshua Van. He's shorter than Joshua Van, which is something you'll never see. Joshua Van's a midget. So we've got two garden gnomes coming up against each other, except one of them's got all of the skills the other has and more. Maybe not the boxing combinations or the determination and grit, but he's got all of the skills to make up for all of that. And he's got everything you need to beat a surging Joshua Van. And I would say he's winning around 3 TKO or submission. I think just a little bit earlier than Taira is able to get it done. I also think Taira could go to a decision win to Joshua Van. I think Kyoji Horiguchi also could go to a decision. It's really neck and neck between Horiguchi and Taira. I just think stylistically, Horiguchi's such a hard fight for Joshua Van. Let me know, though, what you think in the comment section below. I really appreciate all of you watching the video. I know I've got a decent... I'm not going to say it wrong, because I know it's a decent audience of them. Sorry, you'll have to give me a very quick second. I have to address a very specific part of my audience. But if you're... this video is basically for the people of the Burmese audience. I know that Myanmar is where Joshua Van's from, and my last video entailing some Joshua Van stuff got pretty high amounts of views. So especially you guys, let me know what you think Joshua Van does in the comment section below. I actually had some good conversations with some of you last time. And let me know, who do you think will be the toughest test for Joshua Van in the comment section below. As always, if you like the video, leave a like and a comment, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.